I'm making a few changes this winter to my swing, as you might have seen in my lessons with my coach Jason. I feel like now we've really covered the puzzle pieces of my swing and the changes that I want to be getting grooved in this winter. So in this video I want to share with you how I approach making swing changes and how I work on my swing at home, but also do a little bit of a recap of the changes that I'm making, starting with that first touch point, the grip. This is how I'm changing my grip. I'm going into the fingers, so laying the grip in the fingers, and then the thumb feels like it's now down the shaft. And as I hold this, my checkpoint is that the TaylorMade logo, I now can't see it on top of my grip, and it's under my left eye. And then from here, I would just bring this hand in and take my grip, but making sure that I've not let myself slip over a little bit. And I think my tendency with this on the golf course is probably because I would end up, coming in, sort of taking alignment with my club, looking down my target line, and then I wouldn't really reset my grip when I then approach the ball. I would end up sticking with the hold that I had, and I'd probably already slipped to be a little bit too strong there without realising it. But the more that my grip slipped to being a little bit too strong, the more I was setting myself up to roll my wrists, which I don't want to do. Now that we've covered the grip and I feel like I've got comfortable with that feeling, that is almost something that once I've taken my grip, I then don't have to think about it again in my swing. Whereas now, what I really use to dry drill at home is getting familiar with the feelings that I want to execute in my swing to try and override my default tendencies, the habits that can just take me off course a little bit and set me up for a swing that I'm trying to save, rather than hopefully one that I can swing smoothly and swing with confidence. And with my takeaway, so my bad habit is to roll my wrists, which, as I mentioned, my grip before, when it was getting a little bit too strong, would actually optimize for, which is almost makes you think no wonder I was then rolling my wrists if something in that sequence, that domino effect, had happened earlier to sort of set me up for doing that. So now my conscious thought while I'm dry drilling is really using the big muscles to initiate my takeaway, feeling like the hands stay inside, because when I would roll my wrists, I'd see in my swing that my hands would get away from me. And my real feeling, my theory with dry drills is to exaggerate the opposite. So if my default tendency and the habit that I don't want is to let my hands roll away from me, what I want to be exaggerating in my dry drills, really focusing on that feel versus real as well, like taking it to the full extreme. I really want to be feeling like, instead of the bad habit, having my hands roll away, I want to almost feel like I'm using my big muscles to slide my hands inside. So getting as close to my knee as possible. And when I actually then do this and check it in a mirror, again, the absolute bonus of dry drills is that you can do it in front of a mirror, I really realise that they're not actually as close to my knee as they feel, but to me it feels like I'm like brushing my own knee. But I'm just using that as a reference point, a feeling that I'm exaggerating, because it's the opposite of what my natural tendency was to do, which was roll away. So I'm really focusing on sliding, feeling like I'm using the big muscles to do that, keeping the hands quiet. And at this point, it feels like my hands are inside, which they are, and the club is very much outside my hands, which is what I want to create in my takeaway. And I will just get the reps in of that feeling of keeping the hands inside, keeping the club outside my hands, and just really focus on using that conscious thought to build awareness of what this feels like. Because I think if my other habit is what I do by default, what I almost do on autopilot, what I want to use the dry drills for is replacing that feeling, building awareness of the feeling I want to create instead, so I can hopefully tap into that and execute that move rather than just slip back to my defaults. So then from the takeaway, my next move is the turn, and my tendency, again, I think the knock-on effect of that slightly too strong a grip, the rolly wrists, that would then lead me to my bad habit in my turn and the top of my backswing, which was the reverse pivot. So really feeling like I'd almost accidentally started to lean a little bit too much into my left, and I'd feel an arch in my back, feeling like if there was an arrow coming out of my hood, it was heading more towards the ground than to the target, which is what we want, feeling like more my back is flatter to the target. And so the dry drill that I'll do from this, building on from that takeaway feel, is really more just about checking. So again, I'll use a lot of mirror work here. So I'm getting him a new grip. And then with that takeaway move, once I feel like I've got the reps in there, I'm really just focusing on feeling like I get to here, and then I'm just starting to make that turn, really feeling like, again, to exaggerate the opposite, rather than letting myself get a little bit this way, I'm really feeling like I've loaded into my right leg. And again, it's just about getting familiar with these feelings, and for me, building awareness of what that feels like, because I almost didn't even know I'd actually slipped into these bad habits of the slightly too strong a grip, the inside takeaway, letting the hands roll, and then the reverse pivot. And so it almost makes you think, if you're doing that without awareness that you're doing it, how can I instead build awareness of the feelings that I do want, groove those moves that I do want to execute, so that hopefully they become a little bit more automatic as well. And all I'm feeling as a checkpoint when I'm doing this at home is really feeling like I've loaded into this right side. Because again, thinking of the opposite, if I'd let that reverse pivot creep in, I'd be leaning a little bit too much onto my left. So I want to be really feeling that weight on my right leg, on my right side, feeling like I've got it loaded, ready to go. So then building on from our takeaway and our turn, my next move that I'm grooving is that holding of the wrists in the transition. Again, this is something that I covered in my last lesson with Jason, really focusing on what the wrist should be doing in the transition and in the swing as a whole, because I think being someone that obviously has that tendency of my wrists getting rolly, and then I know my other bad habit in my downswing is that I can release the club early, which again I think is a knock-on effect in that sequence of dominoes from bad habits earlier in the swing. But if I really have that conscious awareness of what my wrist should be doing, I can then groove that move in the dry drills at home so it becomes a little bit more familiar and something that I can then lean on executing when I then take the next step in making swing changes and take my swing to the range. My feeling now when I make the transition, that weight shift forward towards my target, is just that I'm holding that angle, and I really want to feel like I'm keeping the club behind me, because again, my sort of knock-on tendencies in my swings to get a little bit over the top. So letting the club come away from me, get in front of me. So if I think of the opposite again, I'm really trying to feel pressure here, good turn, club behind rather than in front, and creating that with the wrist angles. And this is just something that again I'm going to rep at home, looking in the mirror, which feels really weird. I'm really letting my golf nerd out here today, but you know, it's all about building that awareness, that feeling, so I can get comfortable with that feeling and then take it to the range and just see what these moves create when I actually am hitting balls. Because I just find, again, the reason that I love dry drills and that I turn to dry drills is that if I head straight to the range trying to make swing changes, I just can't do it. It's almost like I just haven't built the pathways of those feelings yet. So as much as I try and will for myself to execute the moves that I know I want to, it's just like they're not familiar to me. It's like I have to really try so hard to even make an improvement, rather than just, it feels like the easy thing in my swing is to slip back to my tendencies that I've already grooved by having them be in my swing for a little bit too long. So the dry drills for me just allow me to get that sort of pathway grooved, get those moves grooved, to get comfortable with the feelings, build trust in the feelings by also being able to check in a mirror, check that I'm in the positions I want to be, and just really then exaggerate the opposite to groove that move and have it be something that I can then be familiar with to then experiment with on the range. Because again, it might not work straight away, but at least I've got something to go off. I've got a foundation of feeling that I can then take to the range and experiment with. So that is how I go about making swing changes. That first step is all about dry drills, dry drills, dry drills. And I just love that I can do them at home to really get familiar with those feelings, to then take those feels, those moves that I've grooved from home to the range and then hopefully to the course. And I would love to hear, how do you go about making swing changes? What do you feel has really worked for you over time, or maybe hasn't worked? Let me know in a comment below and I'll see you there.